Hello and welcome to Owning the Narrative. I am Bulow. The show will feature the top news of the week, complete with my observations, and even a little bit of sarcasm thrown in. The top news stories will be taken from my morning news briefings that I write on the Rick Bulow New Media blog every weekday morning. If you go on to like what you see, smash that thumbs up button. And now, let's go right into the news. Ever since August, we've seen people leaving Facebook and Twitter and possibly even YouTube for other social media outlets because they're fed up with the censorship. And if you're fed up with the big tech titan, you know, there are alternatives to them. Based on this article coming from thedailysignal.com. Fed up with the tech titan censors? Here is free speech upstarts. Traditional social media networks are experiencing a backlash from users as they continue to cancel or otherwise censor conservative views. As a result, alternative free speech social media providers such as MeWe and Parler are seeing a surge of new users to their platforms. Here are three of those social media Davids challenging the Tech Alliance. We have Parler, which is an alternative to Twitter. The lack of content moderation and what appears to be targeted fact-checking of users is driving a flood of new subscribers to Parler. As of November 16, 10 million new users have signed on to Parler, the Henderson Bay, Nevada-based social networking application, advertising itself as a haven for real conversation. For comparison, however, Twitter reports 230 million active users. Parler and other services such as MeWe and Mumble have managed to attract millions of members via their lenient free speech policies. Parler, for example, promises not to censor its users on the basis of their opinions and to foster a quote-unquote nonpartisan public space. Those standards differ significantly from the current approach of Facebook and Twitter, whose latest free speech policies have actively limited the spread of false information and fake news, a strategy that has become increasingly aggressive in the lead up to the 2020 presidential campaign, following claims of Russian election interference by Russia in 2016. So long as users do not incite violence or threaten harm, members will not be deplatformed for their views on grounds of misinformation on Parler. In no way will Parler decide what content will be removed or filtered, or whose account will be removed on the basis of opinion expressed within the content at issue. Parler's policies are, to use a well-known concept in First Amendment law, viewpoint neutral. Parler's community guidelines state that policy effectively enables users to post inaccurate content on Parler. Since the site lacks fact checkers or an independent editorial board, Parler CEO John Matz said users will be checked the old-fashioned way, that is, via the Socratic method, which naturally plays out through open exchange or the free exchange of ideas. You don't need an editorial board of experts to determine what's true and what's not, said Matz. The First Amendment was given to us so that we could all talk about issues and not have a single point of authority to determine what is correct and what's not. Parler's hands-off approach appears to be a hit with conservatives, particularly supporters of President Donald Trump, who claim that the tech titans' recent efforts to crack down on election misinformation have unfairly singled out conservatives and users espousing right-leaning views. Republicans in Congress have similarly accused the social media giants of politically motivated bias and suppression. At a Senate hearing on October 28th, Senator Ted Cruz, Republican Texas, accused Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey of unfairly silencing conservative voices on the platform. Who elected you and who put you in charge of what the media are allowed to report and what the American people are allowed to hear? Cruz's comments were in response to the removal of a New York Post article from Twitter about the alleged improper business dealings in Ukraine of Hunter Biden, the son of former Vice President Joe Biden. Conservatives have complained for years now about what appears to be the tech titans' inconsistent censoring of right-wing content while leaving left-wing posts largely untouched. Number 2, MeWe. alternative to Facebook. Similar to Parler, MeWe, an ad-free social media platform that many like in the Facebook, was also founded on a commitment to free speech. MeWe CEO Mark Weinstein told Rolling Stone last year, "If you're just a regular person from around the world who has a political point of view and you're abiding by our terms of service, that's none of our business. But if you're conservative or liberal and you're spewing hate, you're going to be out." Now, like Parler, MeWe has a strict policy against promoting violence, along with other standard exemptions to free expression in its user guidelines, such as prohibiting pornography, bots, spam, copyright violations, commercial solicitations, and the like. Apart from those standard exceptions, the Albuquerque, New Mexico-based social media service describes itself as absolutely no newsfeed manipulation, no ads, and no targeting, a policy that sets it apart from its larger Silicon Valley rivals. The network's relaxed free speech policy has shot MeWe to the top of the app charts. The next-gen social network is currently listed as the number 2 free app on the Apple Store, coming in second only to Parler's number 1 free app rating. Number 3, Rumble, alternative to YouTube. Likewise, the application Rumble, a video sharing website akin to YouTube, is seeing a surge in popularity. Rumble dubs itself the free speech alternative to YouTube. "We don't censor political debate or dialogue," Rumble CEO Chris Pavlovsky tweeted on November 10. Like Parler and MeWe, Rumble has skyrocketed to the top of the download charts on the Apple and Google App Stores. The company has projected 75 million to 90 million user views on its site for the month of November, up from the 60.5 million views it garnered in October. The sudden rise of alternative social media sites such as Parler, MeWe, and Rumble attest to the market demand for social networks built on authenticity and user reform and real user experiences, not only from conservatives, but from all free speech-minded users. And that's true. I mean, I have accounts with those three. I also have other accounts. As a matter of fact, I have everything on my contact page, which I'll link down below, and I'll also share here right now. This is my contact information, email, and social media. And by the way, many people are leaving Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. I'm staying there, because I feel that like Andrew Breitbart said, it's better to put your brand out there, get your name out there, spread the wealth around, so to speak. So that's why I have Tumblr, MeWe, Gab, USA Life, Your, Wego, Wimkin, BitChute, Dailymotion, Vimeo, Twitch, DLive, Veo, Metacalf, and brand new Tube. And I realize I don't have my Rumble up there as of yet, but I will soon. Like I say, it'll be in the description below, so check that out when you can. I'm also on Spreaker, which I have not used much, and I'm also on a gaming app alternative to Discord called Gilded. It's fairly new. It's wonderful. I'm enjoying it, and so yeah, check me out there. Again, link will be in the description below. Now, with the end of the year coming up, and with roughly about a month and 13 days left, or so we think, in the Trump presidency, there's a question as to what President Trump and his family will do next year. Found this from Deseret Times, and it says, January 20th is not just Inauguration Day, it's also time for what's known as a transfer of families, the 5 frenzied hours that precede the current occupants of the White House moving out, and the new president and his family moving in. President Donald Trump and his wife Melania might not be packing in preparation for that day yet, and they haven't said what they'll be doing next as Trump continues to focus on efforts to prove widespread election fraud. Other members of his family have also been publicly silent about what their plans may be for 2021, although the president's loss to Joe Biden also affects their livelihood. But speculation outside the White House is rampant, and some people close to the president are hinting about what 2021 might bring for Trump and his family, and 2024 too. Here's a look at some of the predictions. President Donald Trump, will he or won't he? That's the number one question on whether Trump will run again in 2024. NBC News reported this week that the president is considering running again and making an announcement on Inauguration Day, which would help assuage the sting of Biden swearing in for the more than 74 million Americans who voted for the president. Trump is keen on the idea of formally launching a 2024 campaign on Inauguration Day because that's when he filed for re-election in 2017. People familiar with the discussion said, NBC reported, but other sources told NBC an announcement could come sooner, possibly after the Electoral College convenes on December 14th. Now, although Trump will be 78 in 2024, his age will likely not be a factor since Biden turned 78 last month. And CNN reported that Trump may have shown his hand at a recent White House Christmas party when he told attendees, "We're trying to do another 4 years. Otherwise, I'll see you in 4 years." And Politico has reported that uncertainty about Trump's future plans has some other potential GOP candidates for 2024 holding off on deciding if they will run for president that year. Florida Senator Marco Rubio has said that if Trump decides to seek office again, he will certainly be the front runner and will probably be the nominee. Yet regardless of that decision, it's likely Trump will write a book. He's already written numerous bestsellers. A presidential memoir could likely fetch him an advance of $30 to $40 million, according to Publishers Weekly. That would be a sizable uptick in income, given that Trump has donated a salary he has received as president. Some have speculated that Trump might start a TV network to compete with Fox, which has fallen out of favor with the president. But Mike Allen reported last month in Axios that they're more likely that Trump starts a subscription-based digital media channel that would stream online. It would be relatively easy to do, given that Trump's database of cell phone numbers is among the most valuable in politics, Trump wrote. Of course, not all predictions about Trump's future are good for the president. There is also speculation in some quarters that Trump will be mired in legal problems and possibly prosecution in the coming year, stemming from more than a dozen investigations and civil suits that are said to be ongoing. But if that happens, expect for him to fight back, showing the positive attitude that has shaped him. He also has a history of resilience, as detailed in his 2008 book, Never Give Up, How I Turned My Biggest Challenges into Success. The first chapter details the lowest moment of my life and how I fought back, which Trump had said occurred in March of 1991, when the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times published articles about him being billions of dollars in debt. However, giving up is something that's never entered my life, he wrote. Ivanka Trump. Now, if President Trump decides not to run for office, it would be to clear the path for one of his children to do so. Daughter Ivanka, who has served in the White House as a presidential advisor, is thought to be mulling a political career of her own. She has said that she isn't contemplating a run for president in 2024, but some pollsters have thrown her name into hypothetical matchups. In one, she came in sixth for the GOP nomination, trailing Vice President Mike Pence, brother Donald Trump Jr., Texas Senator Ted Cruz, former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, and Utah Senator Mitt Romney. Ivanka Trump has 3 young children and could decide to take advantage of some newfound freedom in order to spend more time with them. But her father's presidency has afforded her an enviable resume. She is beloved by her supporters and has 10 million Twitter followers of her own. Interviews with over a dozen sources painted a picture of a woman who, much like her father, is interested in leveraging the platform and global relationships she gleaned from her starring role in Washington. One reporter in the Washington Post said, that could be by returning to her old job at her father's company, the Trump Organization, where she oversaw development and acquisitions, or restarting the fashion company she shut down in 2018. Jared Kushner. Ivanka Trump's husband, Jared Kushner, is also losing his job as a presidential advisor on January 20th, but it's doubtful he'll be employed for long given his Harvard University degree and newly British resume. As a result of working in the White House, Jared has made international trade and peace deals. He's on good terms with people all across the world, and so his opportunities are significant. Someone close to the family told a writer for Vanity Fair. More recently, Kushner was credited with helping to broker a deal that normalized relations between Israel and 3 Arab states, and even after the election, he has continued diplomatic talks with Saudi Arabia and Qatar, according to the Wall Street Journal. A former executive with his family's real estate company, Kushner is widely expected to return to that business, albeit with a more global focus, according to Politico. Donald Trump Jr. His sister had a high-profile job in the White House, but Donald Trump Jr. is more likely of Trump's children to lead the MAGA movement when or if the president retires. As Meredith McGraw and Nancy Cook wrote for Politico, of the Trump family members, Trump Jr. is the most influential in MAGA internet culture, making him powerful or popular with youthful, energetic Trumpers. One analysis in the New York Times Magazine said Trump Jr. has a discipline and polish that his father lacks in social media interactions, but said he's not a watered-down version of the president. The article called him, quote-unquote, Trump distilled. He and his girlfriend, Kimberly Guilfoyle, has been effective fundraisers for the Republican Party, the magazine reported. Now, that doesn't mean Trump Jr. will run for office anytime soon. It's expected he'll keep satisfying or supplying oxygen to his father's brand on Twitter and Instagram. He also has his own website, donjr.com, where he sells his recent book, Liberal Privilege, self-published in September. Some fans are ready for a campaign. In October, Trump Jr. posted a photo on Instagram that showed him standing next to a Don Jr. 2024 banner at a livestock auction in Nevada. Trump Jr., however, tweeted it as a joke, writing, "Oh boy, this'll make the liberal heads explode." Currently, he holds his sister's old job, Executive Vice President of Development and Acquisitions in the Trump Organization, according to his Instagram account. Eric and Lara Trump. Eric Trump, who also an Executive Vice President with his father's company, oversees development and new construction. He is expected to continue in this role, but there is talk that his wife, Lara Trump, will run for office in North Carolina, her home state. Numerous news outlets have reported that Lara Trump is interested in a U.S. Senate seat, now held by Republican Richard Burr, who will retire at the end of his term in 2022. Lara Trump, an advisor to the president's re-election campaign, is a former personal trainer and television producer for Inside Edition, who is a household name in North Carolina, the New York Times has reported. Eric and Lara Trump, who currently live near New York City, have 2 children, one named Carolina. She could also choose to seek office elsewhere. In a poll conducted last year, Lara Trump won by 30 points in a hypothetical matchup in New York's 2nd Congressional District. But she indicated recently on Fox News that a North Carolina seat holds a special appeal. It would be an incredible thing. It's my home state, a state I love so much. And look, I think we need some strong Republicans in Washington, D.C. We had a great run with the Senate and the House this go around, but let's see what happens, she said. Tiffany Trump. The president's youngest daughter, Tiffany Trump, campaigned for her father and spoke on his behalf at the Republican National Convention, but hasn't played a role in the administration or in Trump's businesses so far. That may be because she's been busy getting an education. She received a law degree from Georgetown University at a virtual commencement ceremony earlier this year. Tiffany Trump has said in the past she's interested in working for her father, telling George Stephanopoulos in 2016 that having a law degree would allow her to bring a different skill set to the company. The president apparently has had the same thought. After his daughter's graduation, Trump tweeted, "Great student, great school, just what I need is a lawyer in the family." Melania Trump. The president's wife has been busy overseeing the White House Christmas decorations and has said nothing publicly about her future plans or where the couple might live, but there is some speculation that Melania Trump may be happy to leave the White House and the constant scrutiny of First Lady indoors. In 2018, she said she was one of the most bullied people in the world. Hold on a minute. I think Melania would probably be secretly relieved. This is not what she signed up for. Kate Anderson Brower, the author of the book First Women, told a reporter for USA Today. There's also talk that Melania Trump, like Michelle Obama before her, might write a memoir while enjoying the rapidly shrinking window of having her 14-year-old son barren at home. And I don't know. I mean, I think it'll be interesting to see what'll happen in 2024. And, but first, let's just get to what's coming up this year. As a matter of fact, tomorrow is the day that the electors will be named and submitted. So the Electoral College is going to be meeting next Monday. And that brings us to this article from the National Review. The safe harbor deadline is upon us, by Jim Garrity. And it says, tomorrow, under U.S. law, the election results in each state become finalized under what is called the safe harbor deadline. The law declares that any completed and certified vote count made at least 6 days before the time fixed for the meeting of the electors. Such determination made pursuant to such law so existing on said day and made at least 6 days prior to said time of meeting of the electors shall be conclusive and shall govern in the counting of the electoral votes as provided in the Constitution. Now, federal law sets the first Monday after the second Wednesday in December as the day for electors to meet in each state and the District of Columbia, which this year is December 14. 6 days before December 14 is tomorrow. As of this writing, the U.S. Supreme Court has a few hours to act upon a lawsuit filed by Pennsylvania GOP Representative Mike Kelly, who argues that his state's vote by mail law is unconstitutional and that every mail-in ballot cast in the state should be thrown out. This is a case that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court dismissed with prejudice based upon Kelly's failure to file the constitutional challenge in a timely manner, concluding that Kelly should have filed his objection to the state's mail-in ballot law before the state's 2020 primary election and the November general election. As I forgot to hit the share again. It is entirely possible that the Supreme Court will decline to review Kelly's argument, but the fact that Justice Samuel Alito moved the deadline up by 1 day suggests that Alito doesn't want the court to be accused of dragging its feet and not considering Kelly's case until after the safe harbor deadline. Alternately, the U.S. Supreme Court may consider it, but I would not recommend betting any money you cannot afford to lose on the justices deciding to toss out every mail-in ballot in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. When Kelly's case is resolved one way or another, the Trump campaign and its legal allies will have exhausted just about every legal avenue. The president's legal team filed another suit in Georgia Friday, calling upon the courts to declare systemic material violations of the election code occurred that have rendered the required election or contest that would have rendered the contested election null and void as a matter of law and requiring the state to hold another presidential election. For the next few weeks, many of us, or for the past few weeks, many of us have stated repeatedly that once a state's vote count is certified, it's more or less etched in stone. The lone possible exception was the Florida recount in 2020. And even in that case, the U.S. Supreme Court ultimately overruled the Florida Supreme Court and instructed Florida to stick with the previously certified votes. A few Trump fans have argued that certification is a small formality that can be easily reversed after a win in court. Yet somehow, someway, those courtroom wins have not materialized. A Shakespearean twist in Arizona is shifting our attention from the judicial branch to the legislative branch. We find that President Trump and his legal team want Republican state legislators in key swing states to overrule the election results and name pro-Trump electors to the Electoral College. And it's a long article, so I'll stop it right there. I have the link in the description below for you to take a look at. And I mean, it'll be interesting to see just what happens between now and January 20th. Like, it might be interesting to see what happens between now and December 14th when the electors do meet, but it's all interesting. And speaking of challenges, we have this from our good friends over at BizPack Review that says, House Dems challenge election results of 2 GOP seats, implore Pelosi to intervene. The Cook Political Report predicted the Democrat-run House was poised to expand its majority by 10 to 15 seats. But the reality was far different, with the party losing at least 10 seats with 2 races yet to be decided. The crushing down ballot losses, as described by the New York Times, coming as Joe Biden somehow drew more votes than President Trump. As for the 2 remaining seats, with Democrats having their slimmest majority since at least World War II, some in the party are reportedly looking to challenge results in these races, which would put their media allies in a precarious position, having spent the last 4 weeks attacking the Trump campaign for doing so. The Democrats are represented by Mark Elias, the attorney behind the party's efforts to expand vote by mail, and they are apparently hatching a plot to convince Speaker Nancy Pelosi and the House Administration Committee to certify at least one of the candidates as the winners, even if the Republican candidate appears to have more votes as counted by state election authorities, Breitbart News and others reported. Citing the Federal Contested Elections Act, the conservative news site noted that the House can step in and certify a winner in contested races, pointing to 1985 as the last time Democrats did so. The House Administration Committee declared Representative Frank McCloskey, Democrat in Indiana, the winner in a close race where GOP challenger Richard McIntyre was certified as a winner by state election authorities. The real question behind all of this is, where does House Speaker Nancy Pelosi really fall into all of this? Isn't she the person behind the curtain pulling the strings? Or is she just another box to check off to ensure the successful completion of the plan? Having just 222 seats currently and needing 218 to pass legislation, Pelosi has little room for deflections. By the way, the 2 races in question are in Iowa and New York, with the GOP candidate having received more votes. Here's more from Breitbart News. Political reported this week that Democrats, led by Elias and Perkins Coie, have a similar plan for a contested House race in Iowa, where Republican Mariannette Miller Meeks has been certified as the winner of the 2nd Congressional District race by over 6 votes over Democrat Rita Hart. The Wall Street Journal likewise observed in an editorial Saturday, Ms. Hart's campaign said it will bypass an Iowa court appeal and ask the Committee on House Administration to intervene. The House has the final say on its members' elections, and then the Supreme Court has held that courts can intervene in those decisions under the Constitution's Article 1. In New York, Republican challenger Claudia Tenney is leading Representative Anthony Brindisi, Democrat New York, by 12 votes. Mark Elias and his Perkins Coie law firm are leading Democrats' legal challenges in both elections. Now back to Elias. The article also stressed that he was responsible for hiring opposition firm Fusion GPS on behalf of Hillary Clinton's campaign and the Democrat National Committee to produce a fraudulent, quote-unquote, Russian dossier on then candidate Donald Trump in 2016. Republican or Senator Ted Cruz, Republican Texas, responded to the story by taking a poke at the corrupt media establishment. After employing 2 emojis at a face screaming in fear to sandwich the term grasps pearls, he tweets, but if they challenge an election in court, doesn't that mean they hate democracy? That's what the media told me. And there's that tweet from Senator Cruz earlier today. The best critics could do in responding to Cruz's tweet, well, aside from attacking him and justifying the act of Democrats challenging election outcomes, was to correct the GOP senator's choice of words. A point Cruz conceded. Fair point. And that comes from BizPack Review. So things are getting pretty dicey and pretty interesting, not only in the House, or not only at the White House level at 1600 Pennsylvania, but also on the other end of Pennsylvania at the corner of East First and East Capitol. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out of both those challenges in the House, as well as what comes up between now and January 20th. But leave 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 your comments below as to what you think will happen. I'll also leave a comment as to what social media you what unknown social media platform you use, and I'll see you in the next video. Yesterday I had mentioned what 2021 might hold for the Trump campaign. Now let's see what 2021 holds in store for those who voted for Trump. Got this from the Deseret, from my good friends over at the Deseret News. Donald Trump, Joe Biden, and the future of the Democrat, or the future of the Republican Party. Editor's note: on Monday, the Deseret News looked at what might be ahead for each member of the Trump family after they leave the White House. Today, we examine what's next for the more than 74 million Americans who voted for President Donald Trump. In late October, a caravan of cars and pickup trucks rolled from I-15 from Tremonton to St. George, festooned with presidential campaign flags. 10 days before the election, this Trump train, quote-unquote, one of many across the country, drove across the Wasatch Front and through some of Utah's emptier spaces. Throughout the state, they saw overpass after overpass packed with supporters of President Donald Trump. The organizer, Brigham City's Brian Owens, was thrilled. The scope of it did surprise me, the 52-year-old account manager said later, because it really took off. The event, which arose from a public Facebook group he started that now has more than 5,300 members, gave Owens confidence heading into an election he expected to be close. Candidly, he said, I expected Trump to win. Well, Trump didn't win. Democrat challenger Joe Biden is projected to receive 360 electoral votes to Trump's 232. As of Monday, 288 have been certified for Biden, well over the 270 needed to secure the presidency. His victory will be made official, barring a highly unlikely crisis of electors, on December 14, when electors will meet in states across the country to cast their votes. The outcome has left Owens with mixed feelings. I'm not going to be happy about it. I don't agree with a bunch of his policies. I'm still baffled as to how people would vote for a guy who has been in there for 47 years, he said of Biden. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to go out there and hold a cardboard sign that says, not my president, he is my president. But Trump continues to contest the election, and surveys show most of his supporters are behind him, with the outgoing president urging them to continue fighting a battle that appears over. Some fear Trump voters could become disillusioned with not just the results, but with the elections themselves, politicizing the process. More than 74 million Americans voted for the incumbent in 2020. Some 2.5 weeks later, 73 of them still believed he won, according to a poll from CNBC Change Research. In a Reuters poll, 68% of Trump voters expressed concern that the election was quote-unquote rigged. Another poll from The Economist and YouGov showed that 86% of Trump voters don't believe Biden won the election legitimately. Dave Gibbs, the 64-year-old communications director for the Nevada Republican Club, said those numbers match his own observations of fellow Trump voters. I think the polls reflect pretty close, and I'm not totally in disagreement, but he added, how do you prove that? For some, Biden's victory was so unthinkable it can only be explained by some kind of subterfuge. Trump's the president among them. Trump's strategy for challenging the result has been to question the electoral process itself. His allegations of fraud and chicanery have been almost universally rejected by the courts, but echoed by sympathetic media outlets and widely embraced by his supporters. Our voting process is being manipulated and can't be trusted, said Dusty Parkinson, a 55-year-old Republican from northern Utah, citing a complex theory popular on right-wing websites that blames Trump's victory, or blames Trump's defeat on a conspiracy involving the Chinese government. That's scary. Gibbs has his own misgivings. Focus on reports of late-night quote-unquote vote dumps that have been broadly debunked or explained by demographics. But while he's sympathetic to Trump's arguments, he believes the process must prevail. I don't think it's going to work out for the president, he said. You need to prove it. Beneath the surface lies a deeper, more granular story. As New York Times reporter Emily Badger observed, the trick is parsing how much the numbers are inflated by typical partisan reactions to a loss and how much they reflect a lasting erosion of trust in the elections themselves. The same can be said for the extremes of personal opinion. But what happens if a majority of Trump voters spend the next 4 years viewing Biden as an illegitimate president? That perception could become even more prominent in the coming weeks. Multiple outlets have reported Trump's plans on skipping Biden's inauguration and is mulling a 2024 election announcement at the same time that Biden is being sworn in. The foundational idea of democracy is resolving disputes by vote rather than by force or violence. If people believe that voting is being manipulated, democracy loses its legitimacy, said Lana Atkinson, a political scientist from the University of New Mexico. It seems to open up the door for violence, she said, because if the process is all just rigged and fake, then you have to take different kinds of political action. Will Trump's legacy last? In Georgia, where 2 Senate runoff elections are still pending, state voting system manager Gabriel Sterling, a Republican, offered an emotional speech urging a de-escalation of tension. Otherwise, he cautions, citing sexualized threats against the Georgia Secretary of State's wife and a 20-year-old election company contractor who had a noose left outside his home, someone could end up dead. Trump's campaign released a statement in response, reading in part, "No one should engage in threats or violence, and if that has happened, we condemn that fully." But within hours, Trump quote-tweeted a video of Sterling's speech and once more tossed him on allegations of rigging and fraud. Since securing the 2016 presidential nomination, Trump has dominated GOP politics with a personal style of around-the-clock outrage. Many believe he will continue to do so after he leaves office. Trump is not going away, Gibbs said. He has transformed the Republican Party. And many in that party believe that if Trump does announce his intentions to run again in 2024, on Inauguration Day or otherwise, he'd be nearly assured of the nomination. All things being equal, he would be the overwhelming front-runner, Gibbs said. Overwhelmingly the front-runner, a la Andrew Jackson in 1828. But there is nuance within the ranks. To whatever degree Trump has left and will continue to leave his imprint on the Republican Party, others like Owens believe the darkest implications of Trump's methods have been overblown. Any suggestions that Trump supporters will commit violence post-election, Owens said, are quote-unquote borderline offensive. There's this outrage that really isn't there, he added. I think there's disappointment, I think there's concern, but not widespread belief in the failure of fair elections. Still, the consequences of an election perceived by a significant fraction of the electorate as fraudulent or stolen don't need to be violent to be consequential and dramatic, and the very fact this discussion raises alarm among political observers. We're not in a healthy place, Atkinson said. She advocates for federalizing elections, one proposal for making rules and procedures consistent from state to state. We need to agree that the processes are fair and legitimate. Right now, many don't. There are a lot of people in this country who believe this was stolen, Gibbs said. And so they're angry, they're agitated, and they're motivated. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. Now, while that statement can be taken out of context as an omen of revolt, Gibbs still believes in elections. He's referring to 2024. 4 years is a real long time, he says. And I agree with that sentiment. Today is that safe harbor day when the elector, 6 days before the electoral college is set to meet. So be mighty interesting to see how many electors do flip, if any, of course, and it'll also be interesting to see just what happens. Speaking of Speaking of that, Trump has already promised that big things are going to happen in the next couple of days. Got this from the Epoch Times. President Donald Trump told reporters Monday that people can expect to, quote unquote, see a lot of big things over the coming days. On alleged election fraud, I think the case has been made, Trump told reporters at the White House, and now we find out what we can do about it, but you'll see a lot of big things happening over the next couple of days. He did not elaborate. The president was answering a question about what his strategy will be after the electors vote in the Electoral College, which is scheduled for December 14th. The election was totally rigged. It's a disgrace to our country, Trump also asserted. It's like a third world country, these ballots pouring in from everywhere, using machinery that nobody knows ownership, nobody knows anything about. They have single quote unquote glitches, as they call them, glitches. The glitches were in glitches. They got caught sending out thousands of votes, all against me by the way. Starting in late November, Trump's legal team attended hearings and events with lawmakers from several key states, arguing that the legislatures have the power under the U.S. Constitution to select their own electors. They also presented witnesses who claimed there was intimidation, ballot stuffing, numerous ballots that should have been disqualified but weren't, and statistical irregularities. Secretaries of State in several states have said there is not enough evidence of fraud to overturn the election. Over the weekend, a judge in Michigan allowed 24 Dominion voting systems machines in Antrim County to be forensically audited by Trump's legal team. Antrim County hasn't responded to a request for comment. Antrim County spokesperson Jeremy Scott told the Detroit Free Press that forensic images will be taken from voting machines used during the November 3rd election. Judge Kevin Eisenheimer issued the order last week following a challenge from a Michigan voter on a separate issue related to a marijuana proposal. Our team is going to be able to go in this morning at about 8:30 a.m. and we'll be there for about 8 hours to conduct a forensic examination, and we'll have the results in about 48 hours. And they'll tell us a lot about these machines, Trump Attorney General told Fox News on Sunday. A judge actually granted our team access to conduct a forensic audit, Ellis added. Ellis also told Fox News on Monday that the team is currently working on trying to get their lawsuits to the Supreme Court, while they're still lobbying state legislatures in Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. It came as fellow GOP attorney Rudy Giuliani was diagnosed with a CCP virus over the past weekend. And there's that. So that is a few big things happening. However, there was one big thing that had happened about a couple weeks ago, and we had seen and it's just continuing. Got this from the Washington Examiner. Says Flynn, hold on a minute. This from the Washington Examiner. Flynn judge grants long list of briefs signaling quick dismissal not happening after Trump pardon. A federal judge appeared to give a long list of outside groups who previously weighed in on the Justice Department's motion to drop the case against retired Lieutenant General Michael Flynn permission to submit briefs again after President Trump issued a pardon. The schedule indicates the judge, Emma Sullivan, may stall on dismissing the case even after President Trump granted his former national security advisor a full pardon. Late last month, appearing to ignore the Justice Department's request for the case immediately to be dismissed, the judge, who has been involved in the Flynn case since December 2017, instead seemed to move forward with further debate, with the district court docket on Monday showing more than a dozen groups who previously filed amicus briefs related to the dismissal right now be able to weigh in, or might not be able to weigh in the wake of the pardon. I had to take a little, had to wet the lips a little bit. More than a dozen such of the court judicial orders from Sullivan were dated for Monday. The president granted General Flynn a full and unconditional pardon for one, the charge of making false statements to federal investigators, 2. Any and all possible offenses arising from the facts set forth by the information and statement of offense. 3. Any and all possible offenses within the investigatory authority or jurisdiction of the special counsel. And 4. Any and all possible offenses arising out of facts and circumstances related to the investigation of the special counsel, the Justice Department told the court at the end of November, adding that no further proceedings are necessary or appropriate, as the court must immediately dismiss the case with prejudice. Trump announced a Flynn pardon the day before Thanksgiving, tweeting, "It is my honor to announce that General Michael T. Flynn has been granted a full pardon." Flynn, 61, fought to dismiss the government's case against him this year after he pleaded guilty in December 2017 to lying to investigators about his intercepted December 2016 conversations with Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak. Sullivan's granting of the court filings instead of just dismissing the case suggests he may drag the proceedings out until President-elect Joe Biden takes office and beyond. On Friday, fellow U.S. District Judge Reggie Walton was handling a Freedom of Information Act case relating to Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation, opined that Sullivan might choose to scrutinize Flynn's pardon. Walton said he didn't believe Sullivan has a lot of options in reference to what he does, unless he takes a position that the wording of the pardon was too broad, according to the National Law Journal, adding, "Theoretically, the decision could be reached because the wording of the pardon seems to be very, very broad. It could be construed, I think, as extending protections against criminal prosecutions after the date the pardon was issued." Sullivan's new orders appear to allow multiple groups, roughly half of which support dismissal and half who oppose it, to provide their thoughts. The National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, the Uniformed Services League, a bipartisan group of attorneys, Citizens United, and Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost, along with 14 other states, had all weighed in favor of the judge granting the Flynn dismissal. Democrat members of the House Judiciary Committee, 17 individuals who served in the Justice Department's Watergate Special Prosecution Force, a group called the Separation of Powers Scholars, a group of 1,187 former Justice Department officials, another group called the Steady State, comprised of former national security officials, and a group of criminal law professors that argued against the judge dropping the case. Flynn told the court in January that he was innocent of this crime and filed to withdraw his guilty plea. The Justice Department later moved to drop the charges in May. Following a deep dive review by the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Missouri, Jeffrey Johnson, the DOJ said that continued prosecution of this case would not serve the interests of justice, but instead Sullivan, an appointee of President Bill Clinton, appointed retired New York Judge John Gleeson to present arguments in opposition to the Justice Department's motion and to explore whether Flynn should be charged with perjury or contempt. Flynn's lawyers, led by Sidney Powell since last summer, argued in October that Flynn's increasingly hostile and unprecedented words and deeds, and what has become his own prosecution of General Flynn, mandated his disqualification. Acting Solicitor General Jeff Wall said in August that the Justice Department reluctantly, quote unquote, believed that Sullivan might need to be removed because he seemed to have quote unquote, prejudged some of the questions in the case. Now, there was something breaking that I had seen that apparently Sullivan had reversed his course. I'll look into that and give you a result on that tomorrow. But in any event, 2020 has just been a real bear. As a matter of fact, there was something mentioned that if you take 2020 and divide it by 5, you get 404, which in computer language is an error. I think website down or something like that. But yeah, I'm thinking that we can officially and literally determine that 2020 is a 404 error. So as the American Thinker brings out, as an article from the American Thinker says, bring on 2021, this by Robert J. Smith. It was in the musical Camelot, the movie, when King Pellinore, played by Lionel Jeffries, advises Arthur, played by Richard Harris, that the uglier the truer the friend who tells you. Now, with mere weeks to go before the year changes, we have to confront an ugly truth. 2020 is just prelude to crises and conflicts to come. When they end, we cannot say. The 2020s may prove a troubled decade. I don't pretend to have a crystal ball, but there are matters we can be sure of. One need only survey the scene, the wreckage really, of 2020 to understand that America faces the gravest risks to its existence as a free and united country in 160 years. From the vantage point of 2019, had we been told what to expect in 2020, we would have dismissed it all as fiction. And yet here we are at the end of 2020, and the year's facts put fiction to shame. A viral contagion exported from mainland China that amounts to an act of aggression, draconian state shutdowns that have violated our rights and devastated businesses and jobs, the destruction and ransacking of blue cities at the provocation of leftist groups and with the tacit blessings of Democrats, the propaganda machine known as the mainstream media and hyperdrive to support a visibly declining Joe Biden, and Biden, whose resume is a testament to low character and corruption, censorship, coordinated speech suppression across social media in order to impose a narrative to aid Biden and Democrats' election prospects, the machinations of the deep state to depose a duly elected president and possibly thwart his re-election, and the capstone event, historic elections fraud that's near stealing the presidency from the rightful winner Donald J. Trump. The latter particularly is a stunning subversion of Americans' constitutional right to select their leader. It's the last event that should really blow the lid off the national pressure cooker as the evidence is assembled from battleground states, and that evidence is worded and rendered in clearer perspective. The magnitude of the evil, the utter betrayal of our Constitution, will be grasped by more Americans more profoundly. Mind you, not all, mind you, but a growing number. If this attack on free and fair elections stands, it's the stuff of war, whatever the form, or at minimum, it's fodder for open-ended civil strife. As American Thinker contributor Scott S. Powell wrote last Saturday, the American people cannot allow fraudulent election results or even the appearance of such to stand. It undermines the Constitution and demoralizes the citizenry. When people lose confidence in the integrity of elections, their respect for government is eroded and their willingness to comply with the laws it legislates is undermined. If the presidential elections fraud succeeds, 74 million citizens will have their votes nullified. Why would this act of disenfranchisement be other than war by any other means? Such historic election theft amounts to a coup d'etat. Rigged software and avalanches of phony ballots have replaced bullets by the means of waylaying the people's will. The rule of law and the democratic process are left strewn across roadsides, victims of war. There are only two possible results to the current crisis. Both are incendiary. Biden and Sanders brazen out their crimes because GOP legislators and the U.S. Supreme Court have failed to rectify the offenses, or Republican legislators do their duty, and or the court's 5 originalist justices uphold the Constitution, thereby giving the presidency to the rightful winner Donald J. Trump. A Trump victory may have a happy ending, but in righting this most grievous wrong, the road ahead will be rough. The Civil War ended with the Union holding and slavery abolished, but the price paid getting there was death, and it took a century to dissipate hard feelings and end Democrat-sanctioned apartheid in the South. We are nearly two peoples living in one nation. The divisions are stark. These disputed elections will drive us further apart. The criminal enterprise spearheaded by Democrats will resume warfare not only on the victorious president, but on us. This criminal coalition will seethe in rage that their evil designs were thwarted, but by their logic only temporarily. The price for this unholy alliance remains the same: seize power for their gain and to rule over us. Give these rogues credit, their powerless makes them relentless, meaning we need to defeat them so thoroughly that re-engaging the fight is kamikaze crazy. Mob violence, which would resume as a quote-unquote tantrum, as some Danish conservatives have characterized it, that trivializes billions of dollars with a B in property destruction and violence against innocents, including police who are becoming scarcer in Democrat-run cities. You can bet that the mongrels of war will be loose with a vengeance. And what of the deep state? While at the very least, bad players at the CIA and FBI principally would say on offense, hoping to clean out or hoping to stave off Trump's resolute initiatives to thoroughly clean out these weapon nests. Democrats will hold a slim majority in the U.S. House. Pelosi, those herpes, Tlaib, Omar, Presley, and Ocasio-Cortez, Adam Schiff, the Democrats' chief psychotic, and a slew of other power grubbers would make endless mischief for the president. COVID, vaccine included, will continue as an all-purpose excuse for blue states' shutdowns. With Trump installed at the White House, Democrat governors would hope that continuing to subtract blue states from the national economic mix depresses the economy overall. But on the other hand, if Biden and Sanders steal the election, Trump's America won't riot. We're a civil, law-abiding people. We may exercise too much patience for our own good. As a matter of fact, protest we must and routinely. From the instant Joe Biden finishes the oath of office, he becomes a pretended president for tens of millions of patriots. Grassroots political opposition goes like weeds. What comes out of a grassroots movement will depend on the injuries inflicted by the cabal the pretender president fronts. President Trump won't pass his days on the links of Mar-a-Lago. He'd remain a leader of half of America who were unreconciled to the public subversion. That also makes the president a target for Democrats and the left. Trump's tax returns would be plundered, and attempts made to criminalize him and his family. As the LibertyLoft.com points out, no, the mainstream media, want to eliminate any remembrance of him, Trump, his pro-American policy, and anyone that may stand in their way. Targeting Trump for persecution targets all honest, patriotic Americans. Democrats weaponized the law years ago. They'd have no trouble using it as a terror weapon once the White House is secured. What then do patriots do if Trump is so attacked? What of the injuries to our lives, liberties, and pursuits of happiness that would surely emerge from a Biden administration? Where in the days ahead is a breaking point? The point of no return in this unfolding conflict? When will a critical mass of Americans reach their pain thresholds? When will patriots say enough is enough? Very interesting questions which need to be answered hopefully soon, but definitely in the years to come. But let me know in the comments what you think on that. Also, let me know in the comments if you had voted for President Trump in November. What you plan to do, and also how we can best survive pretty much. And I'll see you in the next one. Yesterday I mentioned Judge Sullivan not dismissing Michael Flynn after President Trump had pardoned him. Well, I got breaking news. Judge Finley dismisses the case. Got this from foxnews.com. Judge dismisses Michael Flynn case after Trump pardon. Judge Emmett Sullivan dismissed a criminal case against former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn on Tuesday, putting an end to a case that took a number of turns after Flynn's initial guilty plea 3 years ago. Trump pardoned Flynn in late November after Sullivan refused to automatically grant the Justice Department's motion to dismiss Flynn's case earlier this year. The history of the Constitution, its structure, and the Supreme Court's interpretation of the pardon power make clear that President Trump's decision to pardon Mr. Flynn is a political decision, not a legal one, Sullivan said in his Tuesday order. Because the law recognizes the president's political power to pardon, the appropriate course to dismiss this case as moot. Flynn pleaded guilty on December 1st, 2017 for giving false statements to the FBI that included statements regarding his communications with the Russian ambassador. Those decisions covered topics including Russia's response to U.S. sanctions and a UN Security Council resolution regarding Israel. Flynn also admitted to filing paperwork under the Foreign Arms Registration Act that contained misrepresentations regarding business with Turkey. His sentencing was delayed due to his cooperation with prosecutors. Now, in 2019, Flynn began to claim innocence in the case, calling alleged FBI misconduct. FBI records were produced that called their interview into question, including handwritten notes that indicated an internal question as to whether the interview was meant to extract truth from Flynn or to get him to lie so authorities could pressure him with prosecution or termination. Hold on, man. Flynn's attorneys later filed additional notes from former FBI official Peter Strzok. The lawyers said the notes indicated then FBI Director James Comey appeared to downplay Flynn's calls during the presidential transition with Russia's ambassador as quote-unquote legit during a meeting where then President Barack Obama and then Vice President Joe Biden also weighed in. The Department of Justice moved to dismiss the case, but Sullivan refused, instead appointing retired Judge John Gleeson to argue against the DOJ. Gleeson claimed that the DOJ's motion was politically motivated to help an associate of President Trump and therefore should not be granted. An appellate court ordered Gleeson to dismiss the case, but that decision was later reversed. Sullivan had not yet issued a decision on the motion to dismiss, which he officially denied as moot on Tuesday, given the case being dismissed on account of the pardon. So that's fairly decently good news as far as that goes for Michael Flynn, and hopefully everybody will put that behind them and we can move on to other news. As a matter of fact, there is other news, and that being that mail-in voting has changed the concept of Election Day forever. Got this from my good friends over at the Daily Signal, which says Election Day no longer exists in America. Victor Davis Hanson says, mail-in voting instituted during the pandemic has changed the concept of Election Day forever. A well-known conservative writer and historian says, we've lost the idea of Election Day and it no longer exists anymore as we know it. Columnist and commentator Victor Davis Hanson said Monday night during the Heritage Foundation's 2020 President's Club meeting. With early voting going on and on, there's just no concept anymore of an election day. That was an hallowed American tradition, Hanson said, and we didn't get in the computer, and we didn't even get into the computer age and the upside from this, because now we don't get results until weeks, if not a month after the election, and that's a tragedy. Hanson's column is carried by the Daily Signal, Heritage's multimedia news organization. The annual President's Club meeting, held virtually Monday and Tuesday because of the pandemic, featured scholars and experts from the prominent think tank as well as leaders in the conservative movement, including Senator Mike Lee, Republican Utah, Senator Marsha Blackburn, Republican Tennessee, and Representative Jim Banks, Republican Indiana, newly elected chairman of the House's Republican Study Committee. Donald Trump clearly won the second and final debate, but 50 million people had already voted, Hanson said, adding 100 million voted without going to the polls on election day. The number of mail-in ballots is so huge and they come in such droves and they don't have valid methods to adjudicate signatures and witnesses and addresses. Hanson, a senior fellow in classics and military history at the Stanford University's Hoover Institution, is also a professor emeritus of classics at California State University, Fresno, and a visiting professor at Hillsdale College in Michigan. Hanson told his President's Club audience that he believes Americans have also lost equal protection under the law. By that I mean, when we had this violence in our streets all summer, people we saw that they were committing crimes were not arrested because the police were told not to arrest someone, he said. If they did arrest them, they were often not prosecuted. Instead, Hanson said, a double standard has been created where those who commit crimes are treated more fairly than those who abide by the law. If they were prosecuted, then the charges were later dropped, and so it created a system that there were two laws in this country. If you want to go protest the quarantine, or you're religious, or you want to go to service, you can be arrested. Or if you want to open your restaurant, you can be arrested. But if you want to attack the federal courthouse, you will not be arrested. All hope is not lost, however, given the left's advantage, the veteran conservatives said, pointing to conservatives' gains in the House and in state level races. They have professional sports, they have entertainment, they have Hollywood, they have the media, they have the universities. Hanson said of the left, what do we have? We have talk radio, we have foundations like Heritage, and we have the people with all of that. We did pretty well, and I think we're going to do a lot better. And in a way, I think that's kind of true. I mean, now, I admit I did vote by mail. I've always done vote by mail since 2000 because of the fact that, one, I personally cannot drive. So I have to depend on people like my mom to drive me places. Two, in 2000, 2004, and 2008, well, and even in 2012, I did final poll counts and election voting for the national, for the media, quote unquote media, you know, Voter News Service and Edison Matovsky. So I was required to be in 2000 and 2000 poll at a different precinct from where from where I normally vote. I was required to be there all day long, so I had to vote by mail 2000, 2004. 2008, I did the final poll count, so I came over to my mom's and she had gotten me all, and while she went out, I got ready because she was going to drive me to where I needed to go. Same thing with 2012. So I did final poll counts and the exit polls. So that's why I did the vote by mail and the aka absentee ballots. So I mean, and I know that there are people who do that, and you know that's their it's their choice to do so. So I don't bother that. You know, I mean, one thing that I do have a problem with is the fact that, and I had read this somewhere. I forgot at the moment where it was, but I had actually seen where people vote in September and October via vote by mail and absentee ballot, and also in October for early voting. So it's I want to say it's election season and not election day. Election season being from September 1 through November through the first, you know, through election day on Tuesday. So that's something right there that probably needs to be streamlined. I'll get into that a little later. I'll get into that more in later videos. Probably not a week in review, but I might do one on that. Let me know in the comments what you think about that. And one of the reasons why Biden had won is because of some of the media not paying attention to the laptop or the response about his his son Hunter. And this, coming from BizPac Review, says that the Senate report on Hunter Biden raises criminal, financial, counterintelligence, and extortion concerns. U.S. Senate committees released a damning and lengthy report revealing alarming corruption in overseas business involving former Vice President Joe Biden's son. While the liberal media continues to bury its head in the sand on Hunter Biden's questionable foreign business dealings, Republican-led committees released a new report Tuesday exposing the Biden family's ties to Ukraine and Russia. U.S. Senators Chuck Grassley, Republican Iowa, Chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, and Ron Johnson, Republican Wisconsin, Chairman of the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, put out the nearly 90-page report titled Hunter Biden, Charisma and Corruption, the Impact on U.S. Government Policy and Related Concerns. The U.S. Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs, HSGAC, and the Senate Committee on Finance undertook this investigation into potential conflicts of interest and the involvement of the Biden family in foreign business ventures while Joe Biden was vice president, the report stated. Where's this been hiding? Hunter Biden, charisma, and corruption. The impact on the government policy and related concerns, U.S. Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs, U.S. Committee on Finance Majority Staff Report. There's a link from @StarNights that was tweeted out today. The investigation followed allegations that the Obama administration's Ukraine policy could have been affected by Hunter Biden's position on the board of Burisma, and that family members may have improperly sought to benefit from their relationship with the vice president, the report continued. The committees found consistent, significant, and extensive financial connections among Biden family members and the Chinese Communist government. As the U.S. geared up for the presidential election, the mainstream media gladly dropped stories on Hunter Biden and his contents of his laptop computer. The New York Post was effectively censored over its damning report on the younger Biden back in October, but Senate Republicans continue to pull back the curtain on the shady business dealings. And there is a tweet from Jess E. Princey on that. It's a picture. Hunter Biden and Devon Archer engaged in numerous financial transactions with Chinese nationals who had deep connections to the Communist Chinese government. The Chinese nationals included Ye Jianming, founder of CEFC, China Energy Company Corporation Limited, CEFC, and chairman of the board for its subsidiary, the China Energy Fund Committee, CE Fund, the report stated. They also included Guang Guangdong, who was Ye Jianming's associate, and reportedly executed transactions for his companies. These connections to the communist government are extensive, and, as explained below, he has been previous affiliations with the People's Liberation Army. Based on the information received by the committees, Yi was also financially connected to Vice President Biden's brother, James Biden, it continued. Thus, there exists a vast web of corporate connections and financial transactions between and among the Biden family and Chinese nationals, the senators explained. Hunter Biden has extensive connections to Chinese businesses and Chinese foreign nationals that are linked to the communist government. Those contacts bore financial fruit when his father was vice president and after he left office. A video that was taken down from China's social media showed a lecture by a Chinese professor in Beijing last month on how China has people at the top of America's core inner circle of power and influence. Renmin University professor Di Dongsheng bragged in the video that China has long influenced policy in the U.S. thanks to quote-unquote old friends in top levels of government and financial institutions. Tweet from BizPac Review says, we have our old friends. Tucker covers troubling clip reportedly right from Chinese social media that apparently Tucker Carlson from Fox News. Now, Democrat Representative Eric Swalwell was making headlines this week as a new report linked him to an alleged Chinese spy who helped him get elected. And Republican Representative Ken Buck called on Attorney General William Barr Monday to appoint a special counsel to investigate Biden's foreign dealings. Representative Ken Buck tweeted out on December 7th, the Justice Department must appoint a special counsel to investigate Hunter Biden's conduct and the contents of his laptop. This needs to be investigated free from political interference, no matter who is in the White House. Now, meanwhile, the Senate committee's report noted that the investigation found that the Obama administration knew that Hunter Biden's position on Burisma's board was problematic and did interfere with the efficient execution of policy with respect to Ukraine. Moreover, this investigation has illustrated the extent to which officials within the Obama administration ignored the glaring warning signs when the vice president's son joined the board of a company owned by a corrupt Ukrainian oligarch. And as will be discussed in later sections, Hunter Biden was not the only Biden who cashed in on Joe Biden's vice presidency, the report stated. The records acquired by the committee show consistent, significant, and extensive financial connections among and between Hunter Biden, James Biden, Sarah Biden, Devon Archer, and Chinese nationals connected to the communist regime and PLA, as well as other foreign nationals with questionable backgrounds, the report continued. These connections and the vast amount of money transferred among and between them don't just raise conflicts of interest concerns. They raise criminal, financial, counterintelligence, and extortion concerns, the report concluded. The committees will continue to evaluate the evidence in their possession. And I mean, I'm interested in seeing where that's going to be heading, and I know others will undoubtedly do so as well. And one thing, and finally, in this segment, we have CPAC, which is a conservative political action committee that every year roughly around the end of February, beginning of March, they have a conference held at the Gaylord in Maryland, just outside of Washington, D.C. Well, they've changed venues for 2021 due to the coronavirus pandemic. This from the Daily Caller. The Conservative Political Action Committee, CPAC, hosted by the American Conservative Union, will be held in person in Orlando, Florida, according to Fox News. CPAC will be a 4-day in-person event at the Hyatt Regency in Orlando, Florida, Fox News reported. That in-person conference will span from February 25th through 28th, but it will have several virtual components as well, according to Fox News. Eli Yoakley tweeted out, CPAC is moving from Maryland to Florida this year, per Fox News. For the first time ever, our annual CPAC meeting is moving outside of D.C. to Orlando, Florida, American Conservative Union Chairman Matt Schlapp said in a statement, according to Fox News. For the last 8 years, CPAC was held at the Gaylord National Resort and Convention Center just outside of Washington, D.C. and Maryland, Fox News reported. CPAC attracted nearly 20,000 attendees in February of 2020 before lockdowns and other public health measures were put in place because of the coronavirus pandemic. The annual conference for conservatives has been held since 1974 and has always been held in the Washington, D.C. area, Fox News reported. However, coronavirus lockdowns in the area have kept the Gaylord National Resort and other hotels in the area closed to conferences. In Florida, public health policies regarding coronavirus are different. The state, while recommending face masks, is one of around a dozen states to not have a mask mandate, according to Fox News. In Orange County, Florida, where the conference is to be held, does require masks to be worn in public places. Republican Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has opposed local enforcement of mask mandates. Now, I've been wanting to go to CPAC, but haven't because of money concerns. However, with this being live, well, for one, with this being right in my front yard because I am in Florida, it's tempting, but we've had a lot of setbacks, so I don't think I'll be able to make it. But fortunately, they do have it online, and they have a lot of streamers, so I'll be attending there. And let me know in the comments below what you think about CPAC, if you have gone, and or if you've ever thought of going. Also in the comments, let me know what you think about the Senate report, as well as Michael Flynn's case being pardoned by, or rather dismissed by the judge. And also let me know what you think about it, about the concept of election month or election season. And I'll see you in the next one. Earlier this week, I had mentioned something about tech platforms censoring conservatives, and it looks like YouTube is even getting into the fray here. Got two articles on that. Got this one from the Epoch Times. Says YouTube starts removing election fraud content. Experts say it's unprecedented. By Bowen Xiao. YouTube announced on December 9 that the company will immediately start removing content pertaining to alleged widespread fraud or errors that took place in this year's presidential election, a move that experts say is unprecedented in its scope, and more in such censorship could trickle into every other major platform. In a statement, the video sharing platform said it will begin, quote-unquote, enforcing this policy today and will ramp up in the weeks to come. The company said news coverage and commentary on these issues can remain on our site if there's sufficient education, documentary, scientific, or artistic context. The company, which is owned by Google, didn't provide additional context, but offered an example saying, "We will remove videos claiming that a presidential candidate won the election due to widespread software glitches or accounting errors." The reason YouTube gave for the change of the December 8th, quote-unquote, safe harbor deadline for the U.S. presidential election has passed, and that enough states have certified their election results to determine a president-elect. Scott Watnick, member of the litigation department and co-chair of the cybersecurity practice at Wilk Auslander LLP, noted that YouTube's self-proclaimed, quote-unquote, safe harbor deadline is not in the U.S. Constitution. The only date in the U.S. Constitution pertaining to the presidential election is January 20th, he said. The Constitution is the law of the land, Watnick told the Epoch Times via email. No rule of law exists that says the status quo that exists on December 8th is set in stone, and that the status quo determines who must be inaugurated on January 20th. I fully expect YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, etc. to soon follow YouTube censorship, he added. No one should be surprised if Trump's Twitter account is soon taken down. Now, there are still outstanding legal challenges, including one in the Supreme Court, that could change the outcome of the election. YouTube's statement makes no mention of these, and it made no mention of the December 14 Electoral College vote date. The Epoch Times will not declare a winner of the election until all results are certified and any legal challenges are resolved. Mike Grabowski, an associate professor specializing in cyber law and digital ethics at Adelphi University, said this kind of censorship will likely continue unabated. In fact, it's probably going to get worse, Grabowski told the Epoch Times. Trump was the only politician really taking a stand against this censorship, he added. Republicans in Congress should have attempted to rein in Section 230 yesterday, but instead passed a law that renames military bases with politically incorrect names. Under Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, publishers can be held liable for any content they post, while social media platforms are protected by Section 230, which states that no provider or user of an interactive computer service shall be treated as a publisher or speaker of any information provided by another information content provider. Critics say these companies, which claim to be platforms, are not only maintaining a public platform, but are also moderating the content, effectively making them publishers. Grabowski said the censoring of such videos violates the spirit of Section 230 for platforms like YouTube, noting that the company shouldn't be taking on editorial roles and deciding which viewpoints are objectionable. This is not, to use the law's own words, an action voluntarily taken in good faith, and I doubt YouTube will apply this policy to videos claiming election fraud in other countries, he said. A spokesperson for YouTube didn't immediately respond to an emailed request for a comment by the Epoch Times. YouTuber Tim Pool, who has millions of subscribers on his channels, said that the platform clarified to him that a video must meet two conditions for it to be removed. One condition is alleging widespread vote fraud or error. The other is claiming President Donald Trump won. You cannot combine the two. What strange times we live in, Pool said in a Twitter post. Now, during a November 17 Senate Judiciary Committee hearing, lawmakers questioned the chief executives of Twitter and Facebook over the social media platform's content moderation practices, with Republicans accusing the companies of censoring President Donald Trump's posts about the U.S. election, as well as those of other conservatives. Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle were mostly in agreement that Section 230 should be reformed or potentially fully repealed. Senator Richard Blumenthal, Democrat Connecticut, said a series of hearings on big tech is long overdue on antitrust issues, on privacy concerns, and Section 230. According to Watnick, the widespread exchange of ideas and thoughts on the topic of the alleged election fraud can be a potential death blow to the narrative that Joe Biden is the president-elect. Suppressing the exchange of free thought and ideas is essential to controlling the narrative, he said. That's why censorship has been used by totalitarian regimes for centuries. They should be treated like traditional publishers and stop receiving special legal protection under Section 230, Watnick said of Big Tech. However, entirely eliminating the protections of Section 230 that these social media companies enjoy may have a stifling effect on free speech, as without Section 230, these companies would be subjected to a tsunami of lawsuits and could be sued out of business. And from the Epoch Times, I mean, it's interesting how that is, and also how all of a sudden a lot of things are being censored on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube, and other big companies. They'll be in a. I mean, I know that there have been a few people taken off of YouTube and all, as well as off of Twitch, as far as their videos are concerned. Also, some people being taken off of Twitter and Facebook. That's why many people are going to other social media outlets. And as a matter of fact, I am even on a few social media outlets myself, which I'm on. Not only am I on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube, but I'm also on Twitch, DLive, Rumble, MeWe, Parler. As a matter, well, here, let me just show you right here. This is all my social media information. I'm on Quora, Tumblr, which is a real old school blog, Gab, USA Life, You're Free Here, WeGo, Wimkin, BitChute, Dailymotion, Vimeo, Veo, MetaLive, brand new tube speaker, Gilded. I mean, and whenever I find one, I'll park it right here. So do check back on my contact information off, and I'll leave a description in the link below. And in the comments, let me know what your take on this big tech censorship is. And to clarify, there's this article from theblaze.com. YouTube says it will remove any video alleging widespread voter fraud in 2020 election. YouTube announced Wednesday that it will begin removing content that alleges widespread voter fraud or voting irregularities in the 2020 presidential election now that the safe harbor deadline for the election is passed. Any new content uploaded to the video hosting program after Tuesday that alleges widespread fraud change the outcome of the 2020 presidential election will be removed, the company said in a blog post. Our policies prohibit misleading voters about where and how to vote. We also disallow content alleging widespread fraud or errors change the outcome of a historical U.S. presidential election. The company explained, however, in some cases that has meant allowing controversial videos or views on the outcome or process of counting votes of a current election as election officials have worked to finalize counts. Yesterday was a safe harbor deadline for the U.S. presidential election, and enough states have certified the election results to determine the president-elect. YouTube continued. Given that we will start removing any piece of content uploaded today or any time after that misleads people by alleging that widespread fraud or errors change the outcome of the 2020 U.S. presidential election in line with our approach towards historical U.S. presidential elections. New videos, for example, that claim former Vice President Joe Biden won the election due to software glitches or counting errors associated with Dominion voting systems will be targeted for removal. The lawsuit with the content censorship comes as Texas has filed a lawsuit supported by the Attorneys General of Alabama, Arkansas, Louisiana, and Missouri, alleging that 4 battleground states exploited the coronavirus pandemic to make unconstitutional changes to mail-in voting rules. The lawsuit seeks to delay the Electoral College vote to select the next U.S. president until investigations into possible election fraud are completed. In weeks, YouTube has faced heavy criticism for permitting videos that dispute the election results to be uploaded on its platform. Wednesday's statement addressed a potential conflict between demands from the left to censor so-called quote-unquote misinformation and complaints from the right about free speech. We understand the need for intense scrutiny on our elections-related work. Our teams work hard to ensure we are striking a balance between allowing for a broad range of political speech and making sure our platform isn't abused to incite real-world harm or broadly spread harmful misinformation, YouTube said. YouTube content creators like Bay's TV host Dave Rubin reported receiving an email from YouTube Wednesday explaining the new policies. Adios free speech, the bannings are coming, Rubin said, sharing a screenshot of an email explaining that any video alleging that widespread fraud or errors change the outcome of the 2020 presidential election will be removed. Rubin tweeted out, "Holy crap, I just got this email from YouTube. Starting today, they will remove content about election fraud, even, and it goes on. There's a historic lawsuit at the Supreme Court alleging massive fraud in our election, but we can't talk about it on YouTube." Video producer Robbie Starbuck said, "The censorship does the exact opposite of what they intend for it to do. It will only solidify the belief many have that the elite stole the presidency." Notice they did no such thing about the Russia collusion conspiracy theories that went on for years. Radio talk show and Blaze TV host Mark Levin tweeted, "Big tech oligopoly of the left and Democrats, notice they did no such thing with all the Russia collusion conspiracy." That from Mark Levin. "These are editorial guidelines," YouTuber Tim Pool said. "Time to start suing YouTube as they are now issuing direct guidance on what you can publish outside of what is prescribed in Section 230. And that's true, and I might have something a little more on Section 230 in the future, so stay tuned on that. But, interestingly, the left, the media elite can block that. However, stuff about Hunter Biden, Joe Biden and his family, they just stick their heads in the sand. Matter of fact, right now even Joe Biden is under federal tax investigation. Got this from Legal Insurrection and my good friend Mary Chastain. The investigation has to do with Hunter's business dealings in foreign countries, principally China. Hunter Biden acknowledged that the U.S. Attorney's Office in Delaware began an investigation into his tax affairs. The tax investigation began in 2018. Joe Biden said that he is deeply proud of his son, who has fought through difficult challenges, including the vicious personal attacks recent months only to emerge stronger. Alex Leary tweeted out, Hunter Biden says he's being investigated. From CNN, investigators have been examining multiple financial issues, including whether Hunter Biden and his associates violated tax and money laundering laws and business dealings in foreign countries, principally China, according to two people briefed on the probe. Some of those transactions involve people who the FBI believes sparked counterintelligence concerns, a common issue when dealing with Chinese business, according to another source. Hunter came under scrutiny before the election due to his foreign business dealings. We already knew that about Hunter sitting on the board of Ukrainian company Burisma as his father led efforts. Top officials said corruption after throwing its Russia-backed president. But the New York Post dropped stories of Hunter pursuing quote-unquote lasting and lucrative deals with top Chinese energy company CEFC, which went bankrupt this year. Hunter and his associates set up White House meetings for members of China's Communist Party. He also got an email from a Ukrainian executing thanking him for setting up a meeting with Joe Biden. Now, don't forget that the laptop which had all of this information is part of a 2019 FBI money laundering scheme. Hunter's associate, Tony Bobulinski, confirmed that the quote-unquote big guy in some of the emails referred to Joe Biden. Bobulinski also said that Joe did talk to Hunter about the latter's business dealings, despite making numerous denials. So it's stuff like that which gets shoved under the rug. And yet people want to talk about, the president, President Trump's financial dealings and his bankruptcies and all that. But no, can't talk about Joe or Hunter. No, that's off limits. And one person from Red State, he has a prediction. He predicts that if Joe Biden is sworn in, the investigation of Hunter Biden will lead to Joe's resignation. This by shipwrecked crew over at Red State. There is no quote-unquote happy ending to this story for the Biden family. Joe Biden has wanted to be president for 45 years, maybe more, and if he makes it to January 21, 2021, he may actually realize that dream. Now, the revelation yesterday by Hunter Biden that his attorney has been advised by the U.S. Attorney's Office in Delaware that he is under investigation offers little in the way of specifics, but an informed view of this acknowledgement reveals some practical issues that are of profound significance in ways that are not good for Joe Biden. Such notification came likely by way of a target letter, which is the kind of overt step that would have been against DOJ policy during the self-imposed quiet period leading up to the election. First, Hunter Biden's public statement claims that his taxes are under investigation. Now, that is likely true, but the fact that the investigation is located in the U.S. Attorney's Office in Delaware means that this is just not just a tax case. Cases that are limited to issues of tax evasion, failure to report income, or inappropriate use of tax avoidance schemes or other filing crimes are normally handled by the tax division of the Justice Department. The reason for this is to promote consistency across the country in the federal criminal prosecution of tax crimes. If decisions on tax cases were left in the hands of the 93 U.S. attorneys and federal judicial districts across the country, it's almost a certainty that taxpayers in different parts of the country would receive different treatment at the hands of prosecutors. Centralizing the decision-making and handling of tax cases in one Division of DOJ, provides consistent application of prosecutorial standards. The fact that Biden is being investigated in the District of Delaware means the case involves more than just tax issues. Tax division attorneys and the IRS Criminal Division special agents who investigate the cases have very limited authority to bring non-tax charges. Cases that involve both potential tax crimes and other financial crimes are usually handled jointly, a combined effort of a tax division attorney and an assistant U.S. attorney in the district where there is venue for the charges. The fact that Biden announced that his attorney was contacted by the U.S. Attorney for the District of Delaware confirms that this is a joint investigation and that the investigation is based in Delaware. That means that both the alleged tax charges and any other criminal charges are both properly venued in Delaware. I think it's also possible that if Joe Biden appears to be headed for inauguration on January 21, Attorney General Bulow could name a special counsel to continue the Hunter Biden investigation, as it would put Joe Biden's nominee for Attorney General in a particularly difficult situation of having to determine if Hunter Biden should be criminally charged, especially if Joe Biden is a potential witness. Once the investigation begins pulling information out of the World Financial Network regarding the sources of revenue received by Hunter Biden, that tax trail could lead anywhere. Now, we have the text message exchange with his daughter, where he seems to suggest that he's been paying a significant amount of his own income to Joe Biden for some undetermined length of time. There is also reference to the quote-unquote big guy getting 10% in the structure of one business venture involving investment by a Chinese-owned company closely connected to the Chinese government. Subpoenas are magical things. When you need to seek records, it is never done so with quote-unquote surgical precision. A typical grand jury subpoena for bank account records would cover a period of several years and will request not just statements, but all deposit and withdrawal tickets, checks, wires, transfers, etc. Basically, every piece of documentary information that attaches to any account used by Hunter Biden over a period of several years is going to be information obtained by investigators as part of the grand jury inquiry. But that's just the start. Once the transfer of money to Hunter Biden is tracked and understood, if there is evidence to believe that the money he received is the proceeds of certain types of criminal activity, what happens to the money after it leaves his account becomes a subject of great investigatory interest. Let's assume that there were indicators of fraud, which are discovered in looking into the financial entanglements of Hunter Biden within the United States. When the money is wired to him by his foreign partners, that is a wire transaction connected to the fraud scheme, and now you have wire fraud. It is not necessary that the wire transaction be fraudulent or that it be necessary to the success of the fraudulent crime or scheme. The existence of a wire transaction is needed only to provide federal jurisdiction as wires travel in interstate commerce. Now you have money received by Hunter as part of a wire fraud that makes the money proceeds of a specified unlawful activity, SUA, under the money laundering schemes. The crime of money laundering involves conducting a financial transaction using the proceeds of an SUA. What that means is that every financial transaction Hunter engaged in with funds he received from his foreign partners is a potential money laundering crime. The only other requirement is to prove that the financial transaction was intended to conceal or promote the SUA. That means his downstream transactions were meant to help him hide the source of the funds or to help him carry on the underlying criminal activity which generated the money in the first instance. Every transfer of funds out of Hunter Biden's bank account will be traced to see where the money went and what it was used for. Was real property purchased? If so, in whose name was it purchased? Was any money moved offshore or transferred to accounts in the names of other persons or entities? What was the purpose of such transfers? If any money went to Joe Biden or his brother Jim, the reasons for those transactions will be examined, and how they were accounted for in tax returns. If there were bona fide business dealings that underlie the payments, those will be evaluated and verified. If these are payoffs for no discernible purpose or benefit to Hunter Biden, that will be examined as well. A financial transaction done through the grand jury process goes far beyond the single named individual. It extends to everyone that person did business with. The fact that this is being done in Delaware means everyone in Delaware who has a business connection to Hunter Biden is at risk for getting drawn in. The FBI and the IRS criminal investigators who do these types of investigations are exceptionally good at what they do. The combination of this investigation and health considerations will lead to the resignation of Joe Biden from office. Health reasons will be the public explanation, but there is no way for Joe Biden to escape the web of criminal entanglements that Hunter Biden was involved in with the Chinese and others based on the information that became public prior to the election. I'm confident there is much more evidence than what has been seen. Now that the fact of the investigation is public, when combined with the specific information, documents, and witness statements that were revealed prior to the election and suppressed by the media, well, this can't be made to quietly disappear. And that's true too. I mean, you know, this. Oh, what a tangled web we weave when first we practice to deceive. Basically the brown stuff's about to hit the whirlybird soon, if not by the election cases, as the Epoch Times points out. This what I just read in the legal insurrection and red state would. Leave a comment below telling me what you think about all this stuff with Hunter Biden. And I'll see you in the next video. This is the fourth time that the presidential election has been disputed. There have been three others. What were the other three? Got this from my good friends over at the Daily Signal. How disputed presidential elections are passed were settled. Donald Trump and Joe Biden will have to get in line for bragging rights. This fall's presidential election, the results of which the Trump campaign continues to fight in key battleground states, is hardly the first national election that went into overtime. As I explained in my book, Tainted by Suspicion, the secret deals and electoral chaos of disputed presidential elections, American history has logged four other times when a presidential election was litigated through courts or Congress long after Election Day. In 2000, Republican George W. Bush and Democrat Al Gore engaged in a 36-day struggle over the election results. That was short compared to 1876, when Republican Rutherford B. Hayes and Democrat Samuel Tilden continued to clash from November to March of 1877 before the election was settled, on the cusp of what was then Inauguration Day for the president. The 1824 contest, with multiple candidates in one party, came down to John Quincy Adams and Andrew Jackson, and it wasn't settled in the House of Representatives until February 1825. The situation in 1800 was different, though. Presidential candidate Thomas Jefferson and his vice presidential running mate Aaron Burr got the same number of electoral votes for president. The House settled the matter after 36 votes, giving the presidency to Jefferson, and the 12th Amendment to the Constitution later prevented a reoccurrence. Here are adapted excerpts from Tainted by Suspicion, explaining how the other three presidential elections were settled. Number 1. Adams, Jackson, and the corrupt bargain of 1824. On December 1, 1800, the Electoral College announced the results. Andrew Jackson won the most electoral votes, 99 to 84 for John Quincy Adams. However, Jackson didn't have the majority of Republican or electoral votes, then 131 that he needed. Despite coming in last in the popular vote, William Crawford actually would beat Henry Clay in the Electoral College, 41 votes to Clay's 37. Clay, the House Speaker, no longer would compete for the presidency in the House of Representatives, because the 12th Amendment states that the House decides only among the top 3 candidates. Officially, Crawford was in contention in the House, but it really was a contest between Adams and Jackson. Before the vote, a Philadelphia newspaper, the Columbian Observer, published an anonymous letter January 28, claiming that Clay would back Adams in return for being named Secretary of State. Clay strongly denied this. In fact, 2 meetings occurred between Adams and Clay on January 9 and January 29, 1825. Nevertheless, there was not a lot of reason to believe Clay was divided in its loyalty. He and Adams saw eye to eye for the most part on infrastructure, tariffs, and the National Bank. The House convened February 9, 1825, each state having a single vote that would be determined by a majority vote of its delegation. This time was less dramatic than 1800. This time it didn't take 36 ballots, just 1. And this time a candidate named Adams prevailed. Clay directed Kentucky, Missouri, and Ohio, the states he won, to the Adams camp. Most of Clay's supporters, as well as remaining Federalists, backed Adams in the House, giving him enough to give him a single vote victory. The House delegations of 3 states that Jackson carried, Illinois, Louisiana, and Maryland, went to Adams. This gave Adams a majority of 13 out of 24 states. Though not the first president to be elected after a drawn-out process, Adams was the only president to assume office without a majority of electoral votes. In a downward response, Adams said he regretted that there could not be a do-over by submitting the decision of the momentous question again, to obtain a nearer approach to unanimity. Adams actually wanted to name Jackson as Secretary of State, but Jackson had other plans for the next 4 years, running for president. On February 14, Clay accepted the offer of President-elect Adams to serve as the Secretary of State, presumably making him the heir apparent since the last 4 men to lead the State Department became president. Jackson and his supporters immediately called this a corrupt bargain between Adams and Clay. The Judas of the West has closed the contract and will receive the 30 pieces of silver. His end will be the same, Jackson said, referring to Clay. Number 2, Hayes, Tilden, and the end of Reconstruction. On January 25, 1877, the Senate voted 47-17 to set up an electoral commission with 5 senators, 5 House members, and 5 Supreme Court justices to resolve the contest between Rutherford B. Hayes and Samuel Tilden. Under the proposal, a decision made by the bipartisan commission would be final unless it was overridden by both houses of Congress. A day later, the House voted 191-86 to pass the bill, and lame-duck President Ulysses S. Grant signed it January 29th. In a letter to Senate and House leaders asking for leave, the 5 House members and 5 senators said the makeup of the commission would be viewed as nearly incorruptible, both in fact and perception. Some Republicans believed the Reconstruction governments in the southern states could assure a Hayes victory. Radical Republicans argued intensely that Senate President pro tempore Thomas Berry, Republican Michigan, had the sole constitutional authority to certify the presidential election, and anything short of that would be a cave to the Democrats. Now, Democrats, for the most part, got what they wanted regarding the process, with a joint session of Congress making the final call. Supreme Court Justice Nathan Clifford, a Democrat, would serve as chairman of the Electoral Commission. The panel also included Justice David Davis, a Republican but a very independent one. With 15 members, the Electoral Commission was to have 7 Republicans, 7 Democrats, and 1 independent, Davis, who likely would be the tiebreaker if things became too partisan. However, the Illinois state legislature's Democratic Greenback coalition majority voted 101-99 to make Davis the state's new U.S. Senator. Illinois Democrats thought it would sway his vote to Tilden on the commission, but Davis announced that with his resignation from the High Court, he could not serve on the commission as a 5th justice. It was a spectacular backfire by Democrats in the defining moment in the election dispute. Justice Joseph Bradley, a Republican, replaced the independent Davis. Now, it was the first day of February when the commission convened in the Supreme Court chamber. The Republican lead counsel, William Evarts, argued for allowing only evidence that previously had been submitted to Congress. Everett's argument was largely a practical one, that investigating the Florida vote at the county and local level would drag on and not wrap up in time for inaugurating a new president in March. His opponent in this case, Democrat counsel Charles O'Connor, argued for admitting additional evidence to make the case that Tilden carried Florida. In what would be a series of party line votes of 8-7, Bradley tipped the scale to block additional evidence. The next party line vote was a day later, giving Florida's 4 electoral vote to Hayes. When the Florida vote went to Congress, the Republican-controlled Senate voted to affirm Florida for Hayes, and the Democrat-controlled House voted to reject the Electoral Commission's findings. Democrats perceived that they had a shot in Louisiana. An official returns there gave Democrats a big win, which warranted hearing more evidence. The returning board that certified votes for the state was made up of Republicans. It was, nevertheless, as impractical to do a county-by-county canvassing in Louisiana as it would have been in Florida if a president were to be named by early March. On mostly technical and practical grounds, the commission cast another 8-7 vote, giving Florida to Hayes. South Carolina, by this time, was almost a formality. Hayes began working on his inaugural address February 17th. The only hope Democrats had to delay the inevitable decision and threaten chaos after March 4th was no president in office. House Speaker Samuel J. Randall, a Pennsylvania Democrat, led the effort. In late February, the commission voted 8-7 to award Oregon's single disputed vote to Hayes. Again, the Republican Senate approved the finding while the Democrat House rejected it. In the midst of the proceedings, the House adopted a resolution declaring that Tilden was a duly elected president. On February 26, 1877, the Electoral Commission heard lawyers' arguments on South Carolina. That night, 4 Southern Democrats, Republican Representatives John Y. Brown and Henry Watterson of Kentucky, Senator J.B. Gordon of Georgia, and Representative W.M. Levy of Louisiana, met with 4 Republicans at the Wormley House Hotel in Washington, Representatives James Garfield and Charles Foster, Senator Stanley Matthews, and Senator-elect John Sherman. Their goal to see if a deal could be reached to prevent House Democrats from blocking the results. By morning, the lawmakers agreed to stop House Democrats' delay tactics, blocking certification of the Electoral Commission's findings on the condition of ending Reconstruction, appointing a Southern Democrat to the cabinet, and providing federal money for projects in the South. This was the framework for what would be the Compromise of 1877, which diluted Democrat Party unity. The next day, the Commission, in another 8-7 party line vote, awarded South Carolina's 7 electoral votes to Hayes, which the Senate affirmed and the House rejected one day later. Congress came into session at 10 a.m. March 1 and went through the night. Democrats kept making motions to further delay with various parliamentary motions to reconsider, to call the roll, to recess, anything to push it a few more days and make Republicans sweat. Randall, the House Speaker, even realized by this time it was pointless and refused to entertain any of the mundane motions. At 4:10 a.m. March 2nd, the final obstacle to debate was cleared and the joint session declared Hayes a winner with the president with the bare minimum of 185 electoral votes. So the Democrat tickets 184 electoral votes. Number 3, Bush, Gore, and the Supreme Court. Al Gore's legal team in Florida, led by former Secretary of State Warren Christopher, requested a hand recount of ballots in the Democrat strongholds of Palm Beach, Miami-Dade, Broward, and Volusia counties. Local government and Democrat-run counties were happy to pitch in to produce a Gore presidency. Gore had 266 electoral votes. George W. Bush had 246. The 20-vote spread in the Electoral College was not that different from the Hayes-Tilden impasse. On Thursday, November 9, the computer tally showed Bush leading by 1,784 votes out of the nearly 6 million votes cast in Florida, near enough to trigger an automatic machine recount in all 67 counties under state law. When the machine recount was completed, Bush's lead was slashed to just 327 votes over Gore. Finding more votes for Gore would require hand-counting ballots. The whole ordeal would present a new glossary of terminology such as butterfly ballots and chads, hanging, dimple pregnant, and other varieties. Florida's top election official, Secretary of State Katherine Harris, gave counties until 2 p.m. November 15 to provide reasons on why they should on why they would need to conduct another recount. On that day, Harris turned down requests from both Broward and Palm Beach counties to conduct hand recounts. With the backing of the Gore campaign, the counties took their case to the Florida Supreme Court, where all 7 justices were Democrat appointees. The state's high court sided with the counties and permitted manual recounts in both Palm Beach and Broward to go forward. So Bush's attorneys appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court, saying Florida's high court rewrote state election law, usurping the authority of the Florida legislature to determine presidential electors. That's because the Constitution granted only state legislatures the right to select electors. The Bush team also argued that counting select Democrat counties was a violation of the one-man, one-vote principle of the 14th Amendment, because the votes in Miami-Dade, Broward, Palm Beach, and Volusia counties would value the votes of those 4 counties over the missing votes of Florida's 63 other counties. The justices agreed to hear Bush's appeal of the Florida court's ruling. On November 26, deadline day, Harris declared Bush to be the winner by 537 more votes than Gore. As December began, the Bush team argued before the U.S. Supreme Court that the Florida Supreme Court acted improperly. On December 4, the justices ordered Florida's High Court to clarify its ruling on expanding the certification date. In a 5-4 ruling, the justices halted the hand recount pending a hearing. Gore appealed December 6, asking the Florida Supreme Court for immediate hand recounts in Miami-Dade and Palm Beach counties. On December 8th, that court voted 4-3 to order immediate hand recounts of all undervotes, ballots in the state with no presidential vote recorded. The court, in fact, gave Gore more than he asked for in a decision that provided him with what probably could be 215 votes in Palm Beach County. The canvassing board found only 174 votes and another 168 votes in Miami-Dade County. Further, the court allowed 9,000 votes to be recounted. The majority opinion made no reference to the U.S. Supreme Court vacating the earlier ruling. This concerned Gore campaign operative Ron Klain, who feared the U.S. justices would see it as an insult. The expedited cases of Bush v. Palm Beach County Canvassing Board and Gore v. Harris, both having reached the U.S. Supreme Court, became the case of Bush v. Gore. The lawyers filed brief December 10 and made oral arguments since December 11. The High Court waited until 10 p.m. December 12, 2 days before the deadline. The court's conservative justices, joined by liberals David Souter and Stephen Breyer, sided with Bush in the 7-2 ruling that counting only selected areas of the state violated the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution's 14th Amendment. Seven justices of the court agree that there are constitutional problems with the recount, ordered by the Florida Supreme Court that demand a remedy. The decision reads, although 7 of the 9 justices sided with Bush on the equal protection argument, 4 liberals insisted that Florida should be given more time to count the votes. That's where the often repeated reference to a 5-4 ruling comes in. This was not to dismiss the secondary ruling. Equal protection was the core of the case, but a 5-4 vote stopped the recount. Bush won the presidency with 271 electoral votes to Gore's 266 votes. Now, interestingly enough, that Bush v. Gore was 20 years ago to the day, meaning 20 years ago today. Tomorrow and 20 years ago tomorrow was the rulings. So it's interesting to see how all this plays out. Now, I know that this past Tuesday was the so-called safe harbor deadline, and that the state electors meet in the state capitals on the 14th to determine, to place their votes. Will we see faithless electors come in? I don't know, but things will be very interesting. But you know what? Regardless of what happens with the with this disputed presidential election, Biden's transition is facing some very serious charges and challenges itself. Got two articles, one of which coming from the AP. Biden's transition contends with probe into son's finances. President-elect Joe Biden's historically challenging transition to power is suddenly becoming even more complicated. A federal investigation into the finances of Biden's son Hunter threatens to embolden congressional Republicans who have already shown little willingness to work with the incoming president or even acknowledge his clear victory in last month's election. For sure, it will complicate Senate confirmation hearings for Biden's yet-to-be-named Attorney General, who could ultimately have oversight over the election into the new president's son. It all raises the prospect of an even deeper dysfunction in a capital that is already struggling to address the nation's most pending crises, including a surging pandemic whose daily death tolls are beginning to surpass the devastation of the September 11 attacks. Republicans, and particularly those eyeing presidential runs in 2024, are making clear they will press Biden on the issue. Joe Biden needs to pledge today that he will cooperate with the federal investigation and answer any questions under oath. Senator Josh Hawley, Republican Missouri, said Thursday, and if he is sworn in as president, no federal investigator or attorney working on the Hunter Biden criminal case will be removed. Hunter Biden has long been a source of worry for his father's campaign and was the subject of repeated unsupported accusations by President Donald Trump and his allies. But news of the probe, which was revealed on Wednesday and scrutinizes some of Hunter Biden's Chinese business dealings and other transactions, caught most of his father's staffers by surprise. The president-elect had no public appearance Thursday as he moved forward with filling out his administration, but the investigation threatens to destabilize a transition that has prioritized a methodical rollout of cabinet selections, White House hires, and policy goals, all meant to guarantee momentum when Biden takes office and immediately has to grapple with a surging pandemic and shaky economy. Most notably, the probe casts a spotlight on one of Biden's most important choices, his Attorney General. Alabama Senator Doug Jones and federal appeals court judge Merrick Garland have emerged as the leading contenders. Three people familiar with the matter told the Associated Press this week, but dynamics could shift as any Biden choice now will be scrutinized for any perceived loyalty to the president-elect and bias in any approval of his son. Both Garland and especially Jones have longtime ties to Biden. The president-elect himself is not the subject of the investigation, and Biden aides believe that because other Hunter Biden stories have blown over, this will too. They note that a tax fraud investigation pales in comparison with Trump's refusal to concede the election to the pandemic that has killed more than 290,000 Americans. Biden is expected to answer more cabinet, which will announce more cabinet picks, but not Attorney General on Friday. Trump's initial public response was surprisingly muted. Just a pair of tweets about a Fox News segment on the story Wednesday night. But privately, he demanded to know why the investigation was not revealed ahead of Election Day, accusing officials of deliberately stalling in order to help Biden's chances. According to two presidents familiar with the conversations, but not authorized to discuss them publicly. Other Republicans, including possible presidential contenders, were anything but shy in piling on. If there were ever circumstances that created a conflict of interest and called for a special counsel, I think those circumstances are present here. Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas said Thursday, the Biden family has been trading on Joe Biden's public office for 50 years. Do we really think that will change if Joe Biden becomes president, the highest office in the land? Some of Trump's children have also had to face legal questions. Donald Trump Jr. was scrutinized in special counsel Robert Mueller's Russia report for the 2016 meeting he had with a Kremlin-connected lawyer And Ivanka Trump was recently deposed by investigators from the District of Columbia Attorney General's office as part of its lawsuit alleging the misuse of inaugural funds. The Hunter Biden investigation is the latest in a series of politically charged inquiries that the Justice Department has grappled with in the past 5 years, following probes into Hillary Clinton's email use and the Trump campaign's ties to Russia. Regardless of the facts of the investigation, the new Justice Department will likely feel compelled to assert its independence from the White House following allegations that its actions were overly politicized during the Trump administration. Biden has said he will play no role in independent investigative decisions. There are plenty of people that are going to have their hands in this one, but I think it's really going to be driven by the new administration's push to have total independence on any investigation, said former Justice Department prosecutor Michael Weinstein, a New Jersey defense lawyer. I think that's going to be paramount, he added. They're going to bend over backwards to make sure that they do the contrary to the current administration, which is independence, let the investigation take its course. In this case, though, there is no perfect outcome for Biden. A protracted criminal investigation that results in an indictment would be a major distraction and then some as the new president tries to implement his agenda. But if the Justice Department decides against bringing charges, officials will feel pressure to explain their steps and assure the American public the inquiry was done in a competent and thorough way. Federal investigators served a round of subpoenas on Tuesday, including to Hunter Biden, according to a person familiar with the investigation, who spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss an ongoing probe. The federal investigation, centering on potential tax crimes, had been going on at least a year before Biden announced his candidacy. Investigators did not reach out in the weeks prior to voting because of department policy surrounding elections that prohibits overt and investigative acts. Biden, fiercely protective of his own family, was said to be, in a statement released by his transition, deeply proud of his son who has fought through difficult challenges, including the vicious personal attacks of recent months, only to emerge stronger. Biden struck a similarly defiant tone throughout the campaign whenever questions emerged about his son, which they frequently did. When Trump assailed Hunter Biden as a drug user during the first presidential debate in Cleveland, his father acknowledged that Hunter had past substance abuse issues, but added, "He worked on it. I'm proud of him. I'm proud of my son." The spotlight on Hunter Biden intensified in the election's final weeks after Trump and his attorney, Rudy Giuliani, placed unsubstantiated claims about his foreign business dealings. Those were based in part on the New York Post reporting on a laptop that supposedly once belonged to Hunter Biden and was abandoned in a Delaware repair shop. Hunter Biden had joined the board of Ukrainian gas company Burisma in 2014, around the time his father, then the vice president, was helping conduct the Obama administration foreign policy with Ukraine. But in a subsequent report, Senate Republicans did not produce any evidence that the hiring influenced U.S. policies. Joe Biden largely refused to even acknowledge the laptop controversy. His son, meanwhile, kept almost completely out of the public eye during the nearly 18 months his father was running for president. One of the few times he was seen was on stage outside the convention center in Wilmington, Delaware, as his father was surrounded by joyous family members. Following his speech declaring victory on the president in the presidential election, Hunter Biden and his baby son were right in the middle. Now, what's interesting and intriguing about all this is that Biden is basically handing the GOP an incredible tool to investigate Hunter Biden's corruption. This coming from the Federalist. All of these positions require Senate approval, and during the Obama years, all of these people were in a position to know a little or a lot about Joe Biden's ne'er-do-well tag-along son. China, Ukraine, tax fraud, corruption, and federal investigations. After a year of partisan attacks and obfuscations, media spears and derision, and big tech censorship and deplatformings, this week the Hunter Biden Protection Chamber finally collapsed. As reporting by the New York Post, the Daily Caller News Foundation, James Rosen, Tucker Carlson, the Federalists, and others continue to pile up, corroborated drip by drip. So too do the questions for both the incoming Biden administration and the former Obama administration. Fortunately for interested U.S. senators, the two administrations are stacking up to be virtually identical, and they just might get the chance to ask a few questions. Among Joe Biden's intended nominees are former White House Chief of Staff and Deputy National Security Advisor Dennis McDonough, up for Secretary of Affairs, former Deputy National Security Counselor and Deputy Secretary of State Antony Blinken, up for State, and former Deputy National Security Advisor and Deputy Director of the CIA Avril Haines, up for Director of National Intelligence. Then there's former Deputy Secretary of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas, an apparent expert at wielding government power, top connected Democrat politicians, up for Homeland Security. And let's not forget Chief of Staff Rahm Emanuel, who might get transportation, although none of the left has anything to say about it. All of these positions require Senate approval, and during the Obama years, all of these people were in a position to know a little or a lot about the Vice President's ne'er-do-well, tag-along son and all his pastimes. Step one for Republicans, start with the facts and ask these sterling Obama-Biden veterans to acknowledge the reporting on Hunter's alleged infractions. There's more than a year of it already out there, and despite the Democrat big tech media campaign to suppress, discredit, and censor good reporting and even government statements, the now very public grand jury and Department of Justice investigations demonstrate that earlier suspicions were at least worth digging into. Unfortunately for these nominees, by mid-winter 2021, even more will be known about the investigations and what they are uncovering. Nominees before the Senate will have the choice to claim ignorance, cop up to the Grammy details, or try to push back. No matter which door they choose, they'll face some very awkward questioning. Now, this is just a start. Who will be named for Attorney General? It matters less if he were in a position to directly witness or have direct knowledge of Hunter's profiteering from comprised Ukrainians and Communist Party elite. It matters most if he will publicly recuse himself from any role in the actual investigation. Here's a hint. The answer to recusal will have to be yes if the Republicans keep both their spines and the Senate. Further, will the nominee for Attorney General commit to ensuring his deputies do not interfere within the investigation? Here's a bonus hint for you. The correct answer is once again yes. It's a commitment that ought to be posed not just to the potential Attorney General, but to every nominee who is in a position to interfere. Whether it's an investigation of an American citizen's actions across multiple counties, over multiple continents, that's going to be a lot of commitments from a lot of people in a lot of places. But how could anyone be sure the investigation is above board? That is, unless a special counsel were to be appointed. The idea isn't simple partisan vengeance, though there would be some historic poetry to it. Senators have real cause for concern. I mean, after all, the Attorney General from the administration Biden is seemingly rebuilding once publicly bragged about being, quote-unquote, the president's wingman, and what kind of wingman prosecutes his buddy's kid for selling influence to foreign adversaries. There's time to have a laugh at all this, but it is deadly serious business. The United States has been under attack from China for decades, and might be in an actual shooting war sooner than we'd like. Joe Biden's son rode his father's White House plane to China to make millions allegedly peddling influence to powerful members of the Chinese Communist Party. Far from a game, there are potentially serious ramifications, and a serious investigation is needed. Here's the good news for Republicans. Hardly an artistic bunch. That is, they don't even have to write a script. The script has already been written for them. And that's what I mean. It'll be interesting to see just who President-elect Biden will nominate, And two, it'll be interesting to see said nominee appear before the Senate committees and actually have to face up to what has happened. I mean, I know I'll be looking forward to it. Let me know in the comments if you're looking forward to it as well. Also, while you're in the comments, let me know what you think about Biden, about Hunter Biden's finances, and what you think will happen with all of this. Now, the most important question in all this is, why do they hate Trump? And by they, I'm talking about the political and corporate elite, you know, those who are rich and high and mighty. Got this from the American Thinker by Jeffrey Folks, Why They Hate Trump. Simply put, they hate Trump because he represents ordinary Americans, those who are not part of the political and corporate elite, who lack the advantages and connections of the deep state, who are not media, academics, or celebs. President Trump puts ordinary Americans first, and it drives the elite nuts. The elite have spent so many years enjoying their advantages, including the psychological advantage of despising ordinary people, that they panicked when someone tried to take it all away from them. They can't go on living without that warm, reassuring sense of superiority. Contempt for average Americans was palpable in Hillary Clinton, which is why she lost the election of 2016. It was just too obvious. Joe Biden conceals it somewhat better, or perhaps he just cares more for other advantages of office for both himself and family members. Either way, he is taking advantage of ordinary people. What really upset the elite was that average Americans were beginning to believe in themselves. Their wages were rising for the first time in decades, and they felt proud to be restoring America to what it could be. If Biden wins, that will be lost. The everyday American can call back to his cell and watch the country stagnate for another 4 or 8 years. What if they're deplorables? The guy who delivers the bread to your supermarket, the woman caring for her 3 children at home, the insurance salesman, the checkout clerk, were actually smarter than the Washington types, smarter than you and universities and the media. For the elite, it would mean that the world had been turned upside down. That's exactly what Trump began to accomplish in 4 years. For 4 years, those everyday Americans were treated like something special, listened to, moved to the front of the line. Trump rallies were exciting because they were primarily a celebration of the rise of the real America, of those who get up 5 mornings a week to an alarm clock, start a car in the cold, drive to work in the dark, put in 8 or 10 hours, come back to football on TV in a 2-bedroom apartment, bathe and sleep, and do it again and again. On weekends, they coach and volunteer and attend church and care for family and neighbors. This is a way of life that the Washington elite despise. They prefer $300 restaurants, chauffeured limos, escort services funded by lobbyists, drugs and alcohol, junkets to exclusive resorts, secret bank accounts, and the status of high office. The elite think they are so far above us, but they are not happier for it. It's the parents in Oklahoma with their newborn child, the kid in Indiana receiving his first promotion, the grandparents in Florida living on not much more than Social Security, but still giving of themselves. These are the great Americans who understand what President Trump is talking about, and they're the Americans he understands and respects. Can you say Obama understood and respected these ordinary Americans? Or the Clintons, or the Bushes with their New England heritage and Texas money? Or Clinton, LBJ, or Kennedy with their serial adulteries? Or Carter with their twisted ideology of save everyone in the world at the expense of the American middle class? Only Reagan and Trump put ordinary Americans first. Now, unless the Supreme Court steps in, it's back to quote-unquote normal. Already the word has come down from Biden appointees. Here's the riffraff back to their pens, tape their mouths, steal their votes, and strip them of their rights. It's high times again in Washington. What is really important to the elite is the illusion that only they know what's smart and what's right. Smart was a byword of the Obama-Biden administration, and it implies that anyone who questioned their policies designed to enrich the elite, was truly dumb. It was their way of ending the discussion, like saying the science is settled. Not from being smarter than we are, the next step is to prosecute those who oppose them, And they're halfway there with the accusation that those who question anthropogenic climate change are deniers. The elite are devolving from political snobs to something more sinister. It's not enough to condescend to conservatives. Now the elite want to imprison them. The persecution of General Flynn by a politicized Justice Department should be a warning to the rest of us. Michael Flynn is a hero for standing up to it, but most Americans would probably buckle under the pressure and we'd be living in a totalitarian state. Well, we're close to that already. There are many policies to fear from Biden and Harris, but censorship and persecution of opponents may be the worst thing. Progressives have a history of elevating their goals above the law and established practice. Woodrow Wilson's Espionage Act, FDR's attempt at court packing, LBJ's bullying of Congress and the courts, Obama's pen and a phone. Obama-Biden was the most activist administration since LBJ, intent on promoting universal abortion rights, open borders, and globalist policies that weaken the United States, and they used the Justice Department and the FBI, along with many other agencies, to persecute those who oppose them. What they especially attacked was the traditional faith of the heartland. Hobby Lobby found that out when there was to expect there to be so much more Hobby Lobbies under Biden. When the CEO and founder of Hobby Lobby, David Green, stood up for what he believed and refused to fund contraceptive coverage mandated under Obamacare, Obama's Justice Department sued with the intent of fining and imprisoning him into submission. Green refused to bow to the deep state and ultimately won in the Supreme Court. Thanks to Trump's appointees, the court may be the salvation of others like David Green, but it can only go so far, and there is nothing except a Republican Senate to prevent Biden from packing the court with liberals. Even the court can't defend us against the corruption of the political elite. They believe they have a right to practice graft and influence peddling, and to reap the benefits of drugs, fine liquor, call girls, and the rest. Eliot Spitzer and Klein 9 aren't the only politicians caught up in prostitution. Hunter Biden may be worse. As progressives see it, this behavior is something to smirk about and look the other way. They think it's provincial to think there's anything wrong with Hunter's behavior. Will Hunter Biden's behavior change if his father becomes president? The one thing progressives will not surrender is their sense of superiority to the American people. And their tactics are becoming more aggressive, shifting from disparagement to criminalization. Should Biden take office, expect the censorship and persecution of conservatives to continue and increase. The only way to stop them is to speak the truth and hope the public will vote them out of office. And that is true. I mean, we have all this ahead of us. I mean, we have a very rocky 4 years coming up. Should the electors vote the way that it is now? And I mean, all we have to do is just pray to God and just head on a swivel. Let me know in the comments what you think about that, as well as the other articles that I have presented today and all this week. And I'll see you in the next video. And that's going to do it for the news for this week. I am Mick Bulow. Again, if you like what you watch, please go ahead and hit the thumbs up button. Also subscribe and tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell an enemy or two even. And I will be back next week. Until next time, peace.